Do you remember the first time you saw one? Perhaps you were walking past a showroom in late 1963, and there it was something that looked like it had arrived from another decade. Or maybe you were at Earl's Court that October, and you felt it too, that electric sense that everything was about to change. If you were there, you know what I'm talking about. You remember what Britain felt like in 1964. Harold Wilson promising us the white heat of technology. The motorways stretching out with no speed limits. Young men in their 20s and 30s, your generation, earning money your fathers never dreamed of, wanting something more than the Wolseleys and Austin Cambridges that lined suburban driveways. The Rover 2000, the P6. You knew it was different the moment you laid eyes on it. Those clean lines, that purposeful stance. And when you heard it had just beaten Mercedes-Benz and BMW to win the very first European Car of the Year award, that must have made you smile. Britain beating the Germans at their own game. Maybe you never owned one yourself, but I'll wager you knew someone who did. A colleague, perhaps, pulling up in his new 2000 with that quiet pride. Or maybe you were one of the lucky ones. Maybe you remember exactly where you were sitting the first time you pressed that starter button and felt what a truly modern motorcar could do. Section 1. The bold gamble that saved Rover. Let me take you back to the late 1950s, when Rover was facing a crossroads. The company had built its reputation on solid, conservative motorcars like the P4, reliable machines that appealed to doctors, vicars, and middle management. But the market was changing. A new class of buyer was emerging, younger, more affluent professionals who wanted performance and style, not just respectability. The Rover P6 was announced on October 9, 1963, just before the Earl's Court Motor Show. This was a complete clean sheet design. Nothing from the old P4 carried over. Rover had identified a gap in the market between standard 1.5-litre saloons and traditional 3-litre luxury cars. They aimed to create something entirely new, a 2-litre executive car that combined modern engineering with sophisticated styling. Development began in the mid-1950s under Spen King, Gordon Bashford, and stylist David Batch. These men were given an extraordinary brief: create the most advanced car possible. The team worked under the assumption that Rover's gas turbine engine program would eventually provide the power plant. Those turbine experiments came to nothing for road cars, but they gave the engineering team freedom to think radically. The investment was staggering. The company spent more than £10 million to double the size of the Solihull factory. This was a bet-the-company moment. If the P6 failed, Rover would likely have been absorbed by one of the larger British manufacturers. But it paid off. Although announced in October '63, the car had been in pilot production since the beginning of that year. Deliveries began immediately in late 1963, and by early 1964, the factory was running at full capacity. Rover had initially hoped to sell around 250 cars a week. By 1964, they were building 550 per week and still couldn't keep up with demand. Section 2. Engineering excellence. That set new standards. Now, let's talk about what made the P6 so revolutionary. If you ever worked on these cars, you'll remember just how different they were. Start with the construction. The P6 used what Rover called a base unit design, inspired by the Citroën DS. The outer body panels, wings, doors, bonnet, boot lid were all unstressed and bolted onto a structural inner monocoque. This wasn't just clever engineering, it was forward-thinking. The separate panels made body repairs easier and helped prevent rust from spreading. The real genius was in the safety engineering. This was 1963, a time when most cars would crumple like a tin can in a serious accident. The P6 featured engineered crumple zones front and rear, creating a safety cage for the passenger compartment. The firewall was designed to deflect the engine downward in a frontal impact. All of this was standard practice for Mercedes-Benz, but the Mercedes W111 that introduced these features in 1959 cost vastly more. The P6 brought Mercedes-level safety engineering to a car that the average professional could actually afford. Inside, the dashboard and interior were thoroughly padded. Shoulder harnesses and inertia reels came as standard equipment. The steering column was adjustable and designed not to impale the driver in a crash. In 1967, the P6 received the first AA Gold Rosette for safety, well deserved. The suspension system was equally innovative. At the rear, the P6 used a Dion tube setup with inboard brakes. A Dion system keeps the wheels parallel while allowing independent vertical movement, better handling than a solid axle, while being simpler than fully independent suspension. The front suspension was even more unusual. Gordon Bashford designed a system using horizontally mounted coil springs acting against the bulkhead structure. This bell crank arrangement conveyed the vertical motion of the wheel to the horizontal spring. Why such complexity? The engineering team believed a gas turbine engine might power the production car, and they needed maximum width in the engine bay. The turbine never materialized, but that wide engine bay would prove perfect for the Buick-derived V8. Four-wheel disc brakes came standard, with the rear brakes mounted inboard to reduce unsprung weight. The original 2000 produced 104 brake horsepower from its 1,978 cubic centimeters. That overhead camshaft 2-liter engine was unusual for its time, with combustion chambers cast into the piston crowns, what's called a heron head design. Section 3. The first European car of the year. Here's where the story gets really interesting. In 1964, a group of European motoring journalists established a new award, European Car of the Year. The idea was to recognize the most outstanding new car available across Europe, judged on design, performance, safety, economy, handling, and value for money. The competition was fierce. The judges had the Mercedes 600 to consider, that magnificent, technologically advanced limousine. There were other strong contenders from across Europe. But when the votes were counted, the Rover 2000 had won decisively. Let me put this in perspective. Mercedes-Benz had spent decades building a reputation for engineering excellence and safety. BMW was just beginning its renaissance with the Neue Klasse range. Both German manufacturers dominated the premium car market. And here comes this British car, and it simply blows past them all to win the most prestigious new award in European motoring. The judges praised everything: the handling, the ride quality, the brakes, the safety features, the modern styling. Motor Magazine called it a revelation. The only criticism was that the 90 brake horsepower 4-cylinder was slightly lacking in refinement at higher revolutions. Contemporary road tests make fascinating reading. Motor Magazine recorded a 0 to 60 time of 14.6 seconds and a top speed of 104 miles per hour. By today's standards, that might seem leisurely, but in 1964, this was entirely respectable. More importantly, the P6 felt modern to drive in a way that its competitors simply didn't. The pricing was equally impressive. In 1965, a Rover P6 cost £1,298. Compare that to £1,389 for a Jaguar Mark II 2.4-litre. The P6 was actually slightly cheaper than its most prestigious British rival, while offering more modern engineering and better safety features. Section 4. The market battle with BMW and Mercedes. Now, let's talk about the German competition. In Britain, the P6's main rival was the Triumph 2000, which launched just 1 week after the Rover. But in continental Europe, the battle was different. Mercedes-Benz in 1964 was the gold standard for executive cars. Their engineering was superb, their build quality legendary, but their prices reflected it. The P6 offered Mercedes-style safety engineering at a price that mere mortals could afford. That European Car of the Year award must have stung in Stuttgart. BMW, meanwhile, was in the midst of its own transformation. The Neue Klasse range, starting with the 1500 in 1962, had saved BMW from financial ruin. The BMW 1500 launched at Frankfurt in 1961 with 25,000 pre-orders by early '62. Like the Rover, BMW targeted that same emerging market, younger, affluent professionals who wanted something sportier and more modern. Both Rover and BMW had identified the same market opportunity at almost exactly the same time. Both developed sophisticated new cars with advanced engineering. Both used overhead camshaft four-cylinder engines in the 2-liter class. Both pioneered independent rear suspension systems, different solutions to the same problem. But while BMW was still sorting out production problems with the 1500, Rover got the P6 right more quickly, and that European Car of the Year award, that put Rover ahead in the prestige stakes, at least for those first few years. The judges had spoken. The British car was better than what the Germans were offering. Of course, BMW was learning fast. The Neue Klasse would evolve into increasingly sporty variants, with the 1800 Ti producing 110 brake horsepower. BMW was establishing itself as the sporting choice among executive saloons. And this brings us to one of the most significant moments in the P6 story, the introduction of the V8 model in April 1968. Section 5. The V8 Revolution. By 1966, Rover had acquired the rights to a compact aluminum V8 that Buick had developed. This was an inspired purchase. The engine was light. Rover claimed it weighed the same as the four-cylinder unit and powerful. Once Rover's engineers had improved it, they had a gem. The Rover 3500 was introduced in April 1968. The V8 produced 150 brake horsepower, though some sources suggest closer to 160. More importantly, it produced 201 pound-feet of torque, mated to a 3-speed automatic gearbox as standard. The 3500 could reach 60 miles per hour in 10.5 seconds and achieve a maximum speed of 114 miles per hour. In 1968, this was serious performance. The 3500 was snapping at the heels of Jaguars and offering performance that only the most expensive German saloons could match. And it did it with that wonderful, characterful burble that only a V8 can provide. The manual version, the 3500S, came along in 1971. Motor Magazine went into raptures, an unrivaled combination of high performance with reasonable economy, good handling, and road holding. With the manual gearbox, the 3500S could reach 60 in 9.1 seconds and top out at 122 miles per hour. The V8 P6 became the car of choice for British police forces as high-speed traffic patrol vehicles. They became ministerial cars. And, yes, they became the getaway car of choice for more enlightened criminals. The car had developed a Jekyll and Hyde reputation, respectable enough for a company chairman, fast enough to outrun trouble. Section 6. Production, Success, and Evolution. Let's look at the numbers. The P6 was produced from 1963 to March 1977 at Rover's Solihull factory. Over that 14-year production run, Rover built 329,066 examples across all variants. The breakdown: 211,589 examples of the 2000 model, 80,100 of the 3,500 with that Buick-derived V8, and 32,370 of the 2,200 introduced in the Series 2 phase. These are substantial numbers for a premium British saloon. The P6 outsold its main British competitor, the Triumph 2000. The Series 2 arrived in 1970 with various revisions. External changes included a plastic front air intake, new bonnet pressings with V8 bulges even for the four-cylinder cars, and new rear lights. The battery moved to the boot for all Series 2 versions. The final significant change came in 1973 with the 2200. This model used a bored-out version of the 2-liter engine with 98 brake horsepower and usefully more torque. It came in both single-carb SC and twin-carb TC versions. The 2200 proved smooth and flexible, significantly more refined than the original 2-litre. Production remained remarkably strong right up until the SD1's introduction in June 1976. In fact, the 2200 and 3500 P6 production actually overlapped with the new SD1 into March 1977. 14 years after launch, the P6 was still selling well enough to keep in production alongside its replacement. Section 7. The reality of ownership. Now, let's be honest about the challenges, because if you owned or worked on these cars, you know the P6 wasn't perfect. This was British Leyland in the 1970s, and quality control became increasingly problematic. In August 1975, Drive magazine awarded a rather unfortunate trophy to a Rover 3500, worst new car in England. That wasn't about the fundamental design, which remained brilliant. It was about build quality issues that plagued British Leyland during its troubled years. Industrial disputes were the Achilles heel. In 1964, strikes over earnings restricted Rover's ability to meet demand. At the Geneva Motor Show in March '65, managing director William Martin Hurst said, "We could sell twice as many as we are making at present. Imagine having created a car that the market desperately wanted, but not being able to build enough." In a 1974 interview, Bernard Jackman, managing director of Rover Triumph, admitted, "I think it really went into production a year too soon. Certainly a lot of the body tooling wasn't right and we were having to compromise." Rust was another challenge. Those bolt-on panels could hide corrosion, particularly underneath. The inner sills and the D-posts behind the door shuts were problem areas. But here's the thing. Despite these issues, the P6 earned fierce loyalty from its owners. The fundamental engineering was so good, the driving experience so rewarding, that people forgave the faults. And today, with proper restoration and maintenance, a P6 can be a thoroughly reliable and usable classic. Section 8. Legacy and current values. So, where does the P6 stand today, more than 60 years after its launch? David Bachet's styling has aged beautifully. Those clean lines, the rising waistline, the distinctive grille still look modern and purposeful. More importantly, the P6 quite literally created the market segment that BMW's 3 Series and current compact executive cars occupy today. Before the P6 and BMW's Neue Klasse, if you wanted a car with some prestige, you bought something large and thirsty. The idea of a compact, sporting executive car with advanced engineering, good handling, and everyday usability that didn't really exist. The P6 helped invent it. In terms of current values, the P6 represents remarkable value. Good examples of the 4-cylinder 2000 or 2200 can be found from around £5,000 to £10,000. The V8-powered 3500S with manual transmission is most desirable, with good examples ranging from £7,000 to £12,000, though the very best can exceed £20,000. Even road-legal cars in driver condition can start around £3,500. Compare that to what you'd pay for a comparable Jaguar or Mercedes from the same era. Parts support is exceptionally good. Pretty much everything needed for bodywork restoration is available. The enduring popularity of the Rover 5.8 engine in Land Rovers means there's no shortage of engine parts and expertise. What makes a P6 special today is that it offers genuine classic car driving pleasure without requiring a fortune. You get advanced handling, that wonderful V8 sound, if you choose the 3500, and a car that can keep up with modern traffic. Looking back at the Rover P6, 6 decades on, what's remarkable is how many cars from that era promised the future but failed to deliver, while the P6 actually lived up to its revolutionary promise. This was a car that genuinely shocked the European automotive establishment by beating Mercedes and BMW to win the first European Car of the Year award in 1964. The P6 pioneered safety features, now standard on every car. It created the compact executive saloon market segment that now sells millions of cars annually. It proved that British engineering could match and exceed what the Germans were offering. For a glorious period in the 1960s and early 70s, the P6 was the car that young executives aspired to own. Today, if you're fortunate enough to own a P6, particularly a manual V8 model, you have a piece of automotive history that's still genuinely enjoyable to drive. I'd love to hear from you. Did you own a P6? Did your father drive one? Do you remember the excitement when they were new? Share your stories in the comments below. If you enjoyed this deep dive into one of Britain's most significant motorcars, please subscribe and hit that like button. Thank you for watching.